Hi, this is Tara from Wild Bird Farm, and today we are going to talk about easy herbaceous perennials to grow from seed that also make great cut flowers. A herbaceous perennial is a plant that in our Zone 5 dies back to the ground during the cold winter months and pushes new growth once the weather warms. Their roots remain alive and they grow back each year. There are long-lived and short-lived varieties, and I will cover those as we talk about each. Generally, these plants have one big main flush of flowers, and some put on a second flush later in the season. Some of these perennials also have foliage you can use longer into the season. I love perennials, and especially those I can use in the landscape and in my cut flower bouquets. People sometimes think perennials are more expensive than annual flowers, but when you grow them from seed, each plant will probably cost you pennies. Most of these perennials are relatively drought tolerant once established. Many of them dry well and can be used in everlasting arrangements. All right, let's get started. First up is the delphinium, one of the true blue flowers in our garden. These vertical spikes of blooms usually have 1, 2, or sometimes even 3 flushes throughout the season. There are different varieties, including Magic Fountains and Belladonna. They are great cut flowers and also look spectacular left in your landscape. Look at that color blue. Delphiniums are long-lived and their clumps grow larger each year. Most of these that you see here are second or third year plants. Next up is feverfew, also known as matricaria. There are different varieties, including singles and doubles, and my favorite comes from Johnny's and is called Tetra White, as shown here. This tends to be a shorter-lived perennial, I would say usually about 3 years, so I like to replant fresh every year or so I have a continuous supply. Here it is with the blue delphinium. Isn't it gorgeous? Next up is lupin, also known as blue bonnets. A popular variety is Russell. You may have seen meadows full of these if they are growing in the right environment. Each plant comes back year after year and puts on growth and shoots up more blooms. Lupin has sometimes been said to be tricky to start from seed, but I have found that if you nick the seed coat and soak, it pops right up. Next up is yarrow, and man, I love this perennial. There are lots of varieties, including summer pastels, Colorado mix, and summer berries. There's also a slightly larger white one called pearl or double diamond. This is a perennial and it also readily self-sows. I've found some starts outside of my rows this spring. The special and more vibrant colors sometimes tend to revert back to white after a couple of years, so it might be a good idea to refresh your plants if you see this happening. Next up is that little purple flower in the picture. This is anise hyssop, also known as agastache. I think there's lots of different ways to say it. This is great to use as foliage, and the pollinators absolutely love it. Next up is another one of my favorites, Sweet William, which comes from the Dianthus family. One of my favorites to grow is called the Volcano Mix, but even grabbing a $1 packet from the Dollar Tree grows really well for me. In our Zone 5, Sweet William doesn't always get quite as tall as I need it for bouquets, and I do find that some plants die off after a winter or two. So again, you'll want to replant fresh seedlings every year or two to keep things looking nice. I have found that these grow great in my unheated hoop house. It has perennial eyes there. We've got 2 left. Are you still with me? Next up is sea holly or eryngium. This comes in shades of blue and white, also called glitter sea holly. It is extremely drought tolerant and is an excellent cut and dried flower. Last but definitely not least is the perennial scabiosa, also known as pincushion flower. This variety is the Fama series, which comes in white and bluish purple. This is another favorite. The blooms are 2 to 3 inches across, and it pushes up new flushes of blooms from late spring through the summer. This is great for wedding work. I would consider this a 2 to 3 year perennial, so again, you'll want to plant new starts to keep the flowers coming year after year. Well, that's the end of my list of perennials today. There are lots more out there for you to try. Are you thinking of growing any of these from seed? Another great thing about growing these plants from seed is the flexibility of starting the seed. You can start plants early for spring planting, or you can start them in the summertime to plant out in the late summer to early fall. A lot of them bloom at the same time, so they're great to put together in arrangements. If you love having pollinators in your garden, this group of plants attracts them like crazy. Butterflies, bees, you name it, you'll see them on these wonderful plants. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and look me up on social media at Wild Bird Farm.